Okay, so welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm reacting to a video by a YouTuber called Alexander, and there's this video that was titled Why Rich People Don't Wear Luxury or Don't Buy Luxury. And now I think the title has been changed to Why Rich People Sorta Don't Wear Luxury. So that's very interesting. It'll be a lot of fun watching this. A lot of people have sent this video to me. It's been going viral. So I thought since a few people have already sent it to me, I might as well make a reaction video. So as always, the original link to the video will be in the description below. And without further ado, let's jump straight into the reaction.
Louis Vuitton, Dior, Saint Laurent, Gucci. These are just some of the brands belonging to major luxury conglomerates LVMH and Kering. Positioned at the forefront of the global luxury market, these conglomerates are hugely responsible for the industry's staggering $397 billion market valuation. From clothing and handbags to jewelry and watches, these conglomerates, alongside a few independent houses, stand as the driving forces behind the most coveted and elite luxury products. This industry is a powerhouse. Just to provide you with further insight, LVMH CEO Bernard Arnault, whose estimated net worth is $200 billion, made his first appearance on the Forbes billionaire list in 1997. The conglomerateur briefly even claimed the title of the richest person alive in April, surpassing tech giant Elon Musk. But who exactly makes up the clientele of these huge conglomerates? Who shoulders the weight of that giant $397 billion valuation? Is it the elite? The upper class?
Okay, I think I know kind of what point he's going to make. I think he's going to say that most of the customers for these luxury brands are, let's say, not rich people. It's the middle to lower class, which is kind of true in terms of what makes luxury brands most of their money, as you guys already know on this channel, is, of course, the perfumes, accessories like belts and socks and bags and stuff, footwear. These are the things that make brands most of the money. The things like haute couture or ready to wear, even though it's super expensive and rich people do buy that stuff, that does not make, up majority of what makes the lion's share of money for a lot of these brands. So I think that's kind of the point that he's about to make, but let's see.
Surprisingly, no. It's predominantly the upper middle class that sustains the industry. Jean-Jacques Guiony, the chief financial officer at LVMH, stated to the Financial Times in July, "We don't sell most Louis Vuitton products to rich people. It is to people who have money and want to indulge themselves." So the question becomes, why aren't the mega rich immersing themselves into this industry as enthusiastically as their middle class counterparts? Why are they denying themselves those sweet, sweet offerings from Louis Vuitton or Saint Laurent? Why are the 1% not buying luxury? But before we answer those questions, let's define what a luxury product actually is.
I always wonder what the process is, like creating these pieces. It almost looks like the universe,
There is a life inside.
Absolutely.
While there are lots, and I mean a lot, of definitions for what qualifies a product to be considered luxury, the most common criteria usually comes down to three things: a premium price point that creates a high barrier to entry, incredible craftsmanship with exceptional attention to detail.
I just want to pause it there. I love that in his definition of what luxury is, he put exceptional craftsmanship there, because something I really don't like in luxury fashion is this idea that luxury is how it makes you feel. It's a feeling. I've talked about this before, but I absolutely cannot stand that perspective on what luxury is, because to be honest, at a certain price point, nothing should be badly made. If you're charging more than, let's say, $2,000 for a bag, there is nothing about that bag that should be badly made. The stitching has to be perfect. The leather has to be amazing. And I just find it insane how luxury brands get away with, selling stuff for such crazy prices and the quality being horrible. And the quality of clothing now is way worse than, like, if you look at clothing and you look at vintage clothing from the 50s, from the 60s, is made way better, which is insane to me, because now we have more technology, science has evolved, but yet we make clothes that, are worse in build quality. But that's more to do with the fact that, people just want to make loads of money. We have these conglomerates. We've seen this like over commercialization of fashion through these business tycoons, you know, the conglomerates like LVMH and Kering getting involved. And that's why everything is just about how can we improve profit margins? How can we, you know, make our shareholders happy? How can we? And the priority has gone so far away from the actual craft and having high quality products is really, really annoying. So I'm really happy. I'm going to run this back a little bit, but I'm happy that as part of the definition of what luxury is, he put exceptional craftsmanship.
A lot of definitions for what qualifies a product to be considered luxury. The most common criteria usually comes down to three things: a premium price point that creates a high barrier to entry, incredible craftsmanship with exceptional attention to detail, and a distinct capability to function as a symbol denoting wealth, and more specifically, distinction. All successful brands within the realm of luxury are able to offer these services in one way or another. That being said, there is still a complex hierarchical web at play. So let's begin at the basic level by categorizing them into financial groups. The biggest luxury houses, the ones that come to mind when most people picture luxury, fall into the category we'll refer to as the Major League. Examples in this league include Louis Vuitton, Dior, Gucci, and Chanel. All these brands either already have or are on track to achieve annual revenues of $10 billion. The standout in this group is undoubtedly LVMH's Louis Vuitton, which this year made history as the first luxury fashion brand to attain an annual revenue of $20 billion. These brands, as head of their industry, typically lead the trends that we see both on the runway and on the streets. Their mission goes beyond merely creating luxury. They strive to push the boundaries of creativity itself. The next group of luxury houses is what we're...
I don't agree with that. Like, I agree with parts of it. I think the point that I don't agree with is the fact that Louis Vuitton pushes, you know, creativity forward. I would not agree with that at all. I think if we think of brands that are, you know, actually innovating things, changing the fashion trends, changing how people dress, the brands that, you know, all the fast fashion brands copy, that is not Louis Vuitton at all. That would be brands like Rick Owens, that would be brands like Loewe with J.W. Anderson there. Those are the kind of brands that they make a piece that goes viral, or even, you know, designers like Jacques Mus. Jacques Mus will make a piece that goes viral and then all the fast fashion brands copy it. I can't remember the last time Louis Vuitton did something and all the fast fashion brands copied it. I literally cannot remember the last time that happened. So I wouldn't really say that they're steering culture in any way. I think the thing about Louis Vuitton and brands on that level is that they're just so recognizable by their name. That's why it sells so well. And obviously there's a rich history that Louis Vuitton has, right? And they are able to market that to new audiences every single year. So that's kind of why they make money. The reason why they make the most money is not because they're steering fashion forward. That is definitely not why Louis Vuitton makes that much money.
referred to as the minor league. Most luxury brands find their places in this category, but even in this league there is a spectrum, both financial and creative. Some brands are well known to the general public, whereas others are more obscure, limited to fashion enthusiasts and people with enough money to buy luxury products.
Can you please spell Gabbana? Hello?
The more well-known and financially successful brands in this group generate around $2 to $5 billion in annual revenue. A few brands under this section are Celine, Saint Laurent, Armani, and Balenciaga. This subdivision in the minor league mirrors the major league in that, similar to most major league brands, some are very much interested in a boundary-pushing and more artistic vision of fashion. But it differs in that certain brands focus more on maintaining a traditional identity, aiming to conserve specific codes of dress. The other half of the minor league is made up of brands not widely recognized by the general public, but still hold prominence within the fashion industry. These brands cultivate their own niche of luxury consumers and typically generate annual revenues under $2 billion. Examples in this group include Loro Piana, Brunello Cucinelli, Bottega Veneta, and Loewe. Most of these brands fall under the category of quiet luxury. This will be important later. But some brands like Bottega Veneta and Loewe are typically considered to be artistic rather than traditional houses. Despite this, both brands are still associated to the rigid, quiet luxury movement because they offer products that align with the style's philosophy. Both brands seem to have ambitions of transitioning to the other half of the minor league, aiming to generate over $2 billion in revenue in the coming years and attain broader recognition beyond their niche. An example of a transformation of this type can be found in Celine. Under Hedi Sliman's stewardship, the French house went from being a relatively niche $500 million brand to a global powerhouse, raking in over $2 billion in revenue annually.
Quick question. Can we call, because obviously he said under Hedi Sliman it's gone to over $2 billion annually, and under Phoebe Philo, who was the creative director before Hedi Sliman, it was $500 million. Can we call a $500 million brand a niche brand? Can you be niche if you're like generating $500 million annually? I personally I don't agree with that. I don't think you could possibly be niche if you're grossing $500 million. There's absolutely nothing niche about that.
Congratulations to Hedy. I mean, like, he always, put effort, like hard works, and tonight is amazing.
Okay, now that we've outlined a general idea of the categories, we can begin to answer our initial question. Why aren't the 1% buying into luxury? Well, they are, but they aren't. Remember when I said luxury categorization is sort of like a web? This is where that idea comes into play. Most rich people in America and Europe, and when I say rich, I mean the top upper class, opt to not invest in major league brands when shopping for luxury goods. Instead, they spend their money on select minor league brands, with a few exceptions that we'll touch on later, that all fall within or intersect with the realm of quiet luxury. Quiet luxury is a fashion aesthetic coined to challenge the typical style associated to wealthy groups of people. It's completely understated and subdued. See, there are multiple variations of quiet luxury, but the recurring motifs within them are all subtle usage of or no logos.
Do you know what's really fascinating about this quiet luxury conversation? That's why I've kind of refrained from talking about it. I don't have a video on quiet luxury. I might do in the future, who knows? But I just feel like my audience already understands this anyway. So almost be like preaching to the choir. But it's just like, I'm so surprised that quiet luxury is such a big trend, and it's something that, people are really talking about, because it's always been a thing. This is absolutely nothing new. The fact that, some people that are really rich buy plain white t-shirts for $500 instead of the ones that we buy that might cost $10 or whatever, or that rich people, their jacket costs, their trench coat, that's, let's say, from Burberry with no branding on it, it's just a beige trench coat, costs like $3,000, versus kind of like the trench coat we would get, which obviously doesn't cost that much. That is just so normal. Like, in terms of, that has always been a thing. It's so like normal for rich people to do that, and it's always been that way. And it's just a style. It's just a taste. The weird thing about, the way that people talk about fashion now is that people say, quiet luxury is the more elegant way to dress, and this is what rich people with class do. And no, it's just, if you want to dress like that, dress like that. There are rich people that have more of a colorful personality, and of course the way you dress reflects your personality. Well, it should, and reflects, how you view yourself, how you want to be seen by the world. And some people genuinely love wearing colorful things. And it's not necessarily tacky. That's just their style. They just want to wear colors. So there have always been people that exist on all the ends of the spectrum. And there are super rich people that don't, dress in this quiet luxury way where they're wearing Jill Sander and it's this, if you know, my jacket's actually $5,000, or wearing the row. It's just such a weird conversation. And it's really odd as a trend when it's always been a thing. It's really, really strange.
A subdued or achromatic colour palette, and no flamboyant designs. Of course, there are ways to experiment and play around with these elements and still embody the aesthetic, especially when it comes to embellishments, accessories, and aristocratic colourways, such as gold and silver. But, essentially, the aesthetic is about elevating normal clothes to offer an,
So gold and silver are aristocratic colourways? That's definitely the first time I've heard that.
you know type of distinction. And why is this distinction important to the 1%? Sign value. See, sign value, a term French sociologist Jean Baudrillard coined, functions as the cornerstone of a luxury product. It delves into what an item symbolizes in terms of social, cultural, or personal contexts. In the realm of luxury, sign value stands as the driving force behind the entire industry. It's the literal reason for its existence and success in the modern world. Sign value also reveals why brands situated in the minor league, despite bringing in significantly lower annual revenue than the major league counterparts, might possess symbolic significance equivalent to or even surpassing that of a major league brand. This phenomenon can be attributed to factors and characteristics such as exclusivity, heritage, and craftsmanship that becomes intertwined with the brand's identity. So
Okay, that section I completely disagree with. I think that this video is along the lines of thinking of this like quite luxury trend, which is that, you know, rich people dress in a very understated, elegant way because they're trying to sign value to other rich people that you're one of us, da 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 da. You realize when I wear the piece. I don't agree with that. I mean, as someone that works in fashion, now I myself, I am broke as hell. I'm poor as hell. That being said, working in the fashion industry, you have a lot of proximity to extremely rich people. I've spoken to loads of billionaires. I've interviewed loads of billionaires. I've helped a lot of super rich people with like different work things and been paid to do it. I've consulted a lot of rich people on their businesses from like a fashion perspective, a branding perspective. And to be honest, rich people are not a monolith. It just depends on sometimes what industry they're in and also how they see themselves. So for example, someone who is really rich and exists in, let's say, maybe the financial sector is more likely to be in this quote unquote quiet luxury. They have their suits made in Savile Row and some of their suits literally cost $40,000, but you wouldn't know because it's just a really, really, really good fitting suit. You wouldn't know unless you know, type of thing. And then there are people I know that are billionaires who don't do any of that, and they wear Yohji Yamamoto and Rick Owens, and sometimes they even wear ostentatious Gucci pieces, but not like the pieces with logos, just like the blouse, the Alessandro Michele type of stuff that's like really colorful, but it's not like logo heavy. So if you don't know what it is, you might not know what brand it is. So I think it just depends on the type of person. The billionaires that I know that exist more in the creative side of things, they're billionaires from the creative industry. They dress way more colorfully, and it's not about, you know, quiet luxury and signposting value. And also, rich people don't give this thing this much thought. I think people are making an assumption that they give clothing this much thought. The only people that think about clothing this much are people that actually care about style and fashion. Most rich people don't. Most rich people just care about making more money. And eventually they might care about fashion. I know a few people that they eventually got a stylist, and that's kind of how they started caring about fashion. But these are some huge assumptions here. If you read How Luxury Lost Its Luster, the book by Dana Thomas, which I talk about on my Patreon, I'm reviewing this book. We talk about Armani in one of the Patreon book club episodes, and we talk about how Giorgio Armani's whole thing was that he noticed that there are two types of men, the unfashionable men, and then the men that are so fashionable they have their own tailors. And so you're never going to reach the fashionable men because they have their tailors, they know what they want, they know how they like to dress, their tailors have a really good relationship with them. And then the unfashionable people that don't really know what they're doing, and they go and buy really bad fitting suits off the rack. So Armani thought, if I can make this really interesting soft suit that can fit most people well off the rack, then I've done my job properly, which is what Armani did. And that's why Armani became huge. And that's why, you know, Armani is respected till today, right? That is the case for even most rich people. They don't have tailors. They don't go to Savile Row, not because they don't have the money for it. They just don't have the foresight to know that's where they should be. Or maybe they just don't care, or they don't want to spend all that time going back and forth with a tailor getting fittings. So there's this big assumption that, you know, once you become rich, you're just an arbiter of style. From my personal experience, talking to a lot of rich people, that is just 100% not the case. And I work in the fashion industry, so a lot of super rich people that I talk to are people that are interested in fashion in a way, and even they don't even know what they're doing when it comes to style. They don't have their own style. They're asking me all these questions. So just wanted to point that out.
Choosing to dress in a more understated manner, the 1% adopt a kind of sign value that signals to others that they aren't new money, people who have only recently acquired their wealth. The idea is that new money tends to showcase affluence through flashy displays, often marked by ostentation and conspicuous consumption. In contrast, the 1% tend to prefer a subtler approach, embodying a more restrained sense of style that suggests they come from long-standing generational wealth. This distinction reflects a cultural narrative where old money conveys a sense of tradition, refinement, and social standing, while new money is associated with a more brash and immediate display of wealth.
We were inspired by the Hall of Mirror in Versailles and Donald Trump's bathroom.
That said, despite being considered new money because their wealth doesn't go back generations, members of the LVMH family, who are literally at the helm of almost every major luxury brand in the world, also embrace a simplistic approach to style. This underscores 2 points. First, the old money, new money dynamics are less literal than they are.
I don't think the LVMH family are a good example to use because the LVMH family are literally the owners of a massive fashion empire. Fashion is what they breathe. So of course, people like the LVMH family, they're going to be way more stylish and style conscious than your average, billionaire or rich person because that is literally their industry. So the LVMH family are the kind of people that, would go to Savile Row and get their suits tailored and things like that. But that's the LVMH family though.
State of mind. And second, that these rigid distinctions do not completely apply to the modern day. Increasingly, uber-rich families...
I said LVMH family, I mean the Arnault family. LVMH family. That's your conglomerate, the Arnault family.
Individuals who would be considered new money are adopting characteristics traditionally associated with old money. But back to the topic at hand. The 1% don't want Louis Vuitton monograms covering their handbags, and they really don't want Gucci motifs all over their clothing. They intentionally avoid being plastered in overt luxury because they're aiming to convey that they themselves personify wealth. I hinted at this before, but the brands that capture the attention of the 1% can usually find themselves in the minor league. Brunello Cucinelli, Loro Piana, Ralph Lauren, Celine, all these brands fit neatly into the realm of quiet luxury. See, it's not the uber-rich carrying the heavyweights of the industry. Most of them purposefully ignore the big designers and brands in fashion. It's the upper middle class doing all that heavy lifting. And how do we know this?
Fast-breaking developments in the coronavirus emergency in the US and around the world. The number of cases soaring just today, more than 24,000 now nationwide.
During the pandemic, while most businesses were grappling with dangerous financial underperformance and the very real possibility of permanent closure, the fashion industry thrived. LVMH's fashion and leather goods units saw a significant 18% increase in sales during the fourth quarter of 2020. Gucci, Kering's crown jewel, delivered revenues of $11 billion, up 31.2% from 2020. Exceeding pre-pandemic levels in 2021.
I'm just going to pause it there. There's actually added context to why luxury brands, didn't suffer compared to a lot of other industries. So a big reason why is when COVID-19 happened and there were all these lockdowns. I don't know about other countries, but in the UK, we had something called furlough, which meant that people, even though they were in lockdowns and they weren't necessarily working, they still got a percentage of what they would normally earn. For me, it was 80% of my income, right? But imagine I'm earning 80% of my income, but I'm not spending how much money I would spend traveling to work. I'm not buying, lunch outside like I normally would in central London when I was working. I don't have all these expenses, right? But then I have this disposable income. Now, for some people, if you had enough money, people were doing things like investing. Rich people are buying up properties. That's why now we have an even bigger property issue in the UK. That's part of the reason why. But that's a conversation for another day. And then a lot of other people just, spent money on things that they otherwise wouldn't have the money to spend it on because all their money is normally spent paying for their normal expenses, which they didn't have now that the lockdown was happening. So that's why we saw people buying luxury brands that they've always wanted to buy. So that's the added context as to why a lot of people bought luxury, even in a lockdown and in a pandemic.
Another luxury conglomerate, Richemont, reported sales exceeding $6 billion in the company's third quarter of 2021, a performance 38% better than their 2019 Christmas quarter before the pandemic. The industry was experiencing an unprecedented boom. Any guess who was leading this boom? The upper middle class, of course. You see, during the pandemic, a significant portion of the upper middle class indulged in luxury treats with the additional savings they had in the bank. There was this sense that the world could literally come to an end at any moment, and this uncertainty about the future led many to believe that living in the moment was imperative. That even when quarantining with only a few friends and family, we had to live every day like it's our last. And what was the result of this YOLO attitude? People started splurging out. You need to keep in mind what our good friends Jean-Jacques Guiony said earlier. Most luxury items from major league brands are not targeted at the uber-wealthy upper classes, but instead at the upper middle classes. While I should know that major league brands do...
That's just not true. That's just not true. It's not true. These brands cater to everyone. They just have a product for each person. So a brand like Chanel has haute couture for the super, super rich. And the super, super rich, once again, as someone that works in fashion, I know who the customers are of Chanel haute couture. And they are super rich people, like extremely rich women, right? They buy the haute couture. Then you have, the middle classes that might buy a ready-to-wear piece here and there. They might buy a bag. They might buy like Chanel pumps or something like that. They might even buy like the jewelry. Then you have maybe the lower to middle classes buying, Chanel No. 5, the perfumes, all these things. They have something for everyone. It's a numbers game. If you think of, let's just talk about fashion history, right? If you think of Christian Dior or Cristobal Balenciaga or Yves Saint Laurent, maybe Yves Saint Laurent is even too modern. Let's just start with Christian Dior and Cristobal Balenciaga. These people were dressing aristocrats. They were dressing only the rich of the rich. Those are the only people that could afford their clothing, right? No one else could even come close to affording their clothes. And they make significantly less money than when they started, licensing out the rights of their clothes to countries like America and different sellers in America to, copy their things. And then obviously that developed, and how luxury developed. You had people like Bernard Arnault becoming involved, buying a lot of these brands, vertically integrating a lot of these brands and then owning everything and having stores in America instead of what used to happen where these couturiers used to just license out the rights for people to copy these clothes in different countries. So it's a numbers game. When they were dressing only the rich of the rich, the brands made way less money than when they started, yes, we're dressing the rich, but we're also providing things for people at different ends of the financial spectrum. That's when they started to become like billion-dollar brands, multi-million-dollar brands. So it isn't just because majority of their customer base is now the middle class and the lower class that suddenly rich people don't buy it. That is just not true. Rich people have always bought these brands. And in fact, when it was mainly aristocrats buying these brands were making the least amount of money in their history. So all it is just brands realize that we can sell things to every single person in the world. Let's not just market our products to the richest people because it's, limiting how much money we can make. That's why this happens. So I think it's just a strange assumption that, the 1% don't buy luxury brands because the majority of their customer base is middle class. That's just not true.
To offer custom-made to order products exclusively designed for the 1% to request and purchase, such as couture and tailor-made clothing, the majority of their offerings cater to and are marketed towards the upper middle class and nouveau riche. Are they expensive? I mean, yeah, but are they within reach? Absolutely. Relying solely on selling to the 1% wouldn't be enough to pass that $10 billion mark.
Okay, so he just made the point exactly. Relying solely on 1% is never ever going to, make you that rich as a company. You're not going to be a $20 billion brand if you're only selling to the 1%. But I think so I agree with most of the points made in this video. I think where I disagree with this video is saying that because majority of the customers are middle class, that means that the 1% don't buy these brands. They 100% do.
It's important to note that when people say the 1% nowadays, it's usually colloquialism for the 0.1%, a very, very small demographic of people in the world. And do you think ambitious brands and conglomerates want to depend solely or even primarily on this demographic to achieve $10 billion goals? No way. It's too risky. But the middle classes, on the other hand, they're the perfect group to rely on. Estimates indicate that the middle class demographic comprised about 350 million people, more than the entire population of the US. Men and women from the middle classes are the ones purchasing these $3,000 handbags. Men and women from the middle classes are the ones splurging on pieces.
See what I mean? It's not true. It's not. Yes, the middle class are the ones buying these handbags, but rich people buy these handbags too. Let me know. Do you guys know any, think of any super, super rich woman you know? She owns a luxury handbag. I don't care who it is. Like any billionaire woman we know, they own handbags. They own luxury handbags. It's not just the middle class that are buying these luxury handbags. It's everyone with money that buys a luxury handbag. And just because someone is rich doesn't mean they're all of a sudden going to buy the low-key handbag. They have it all because they're just that rich. So the people that are in the top 1%, they have the Chanel bag and the Louis Vuitton bag and the Loewe bag and the Jacquemus bag and the low-key brands that are more luxury. They have it all. They have massive closets in their house that you walk in and one part of the room is just 100 luxury bags. That is the 1%. That is literally what their closets look like. So,
Plus. But remember, that was life during the pandemic. During that epic boom with constant record-breaking highs in the industry. What about now? Yeah, now it's not looking so good. The fashion industry, across nearly every metric, has been struggling to grapple with the post-pandemic world. Although still generating billions, the industry has significantly slowed down this past year, with LVMH experiencing a below-estimated 9% organic revenue growth and being dethroned by drug maker Novo Nordisk at the most valuable company in Europe. Major league brands like Gucci are going through a very public struggle, with the brand's organic sales falling 7% in the third quarter of 2023, worse than the 6.2% expected by analysts. The brand even appointed new creative director Sabato De Sarno, who critiques have noted has taken a considerably less daring approach to Gucci than his predecessor Alessandro Michel. Creative brands in the minor league such as Saint Laurent and Balenciaga have also had to grapple with the new reality, with both reportedly experiencing some level of underperformance in the sales this year. But why is this? Why did an industry experiencing so much growth during a pandemic all of a sudden begin to slow down once we emerged from the crisis? Simple. The 1% are still spending, and the middle classes are not. Middle-class populations have begun to cut back on luxury spending, opting instead to save money and uniformly limit expenditures on non-essentials. They are also delaying major purchases such as homes and cars, redirecting more money into savings amid rising levels of inflation and the global cost of living crisis. Bloomberg reports that this shift in behavior is occurring on a global scale, affecting China, America, and Europe, all massive markets for the luxury industry. This trend explains the declines and underperformances seen from the major league brands relying on middle-class spending. But, as you've probably already guessed, the brands not recording underperformances are predominantly from the latter category of the minor class. Brunello Cucinelli, Ermenegildo Zegna, Loro Piana, Loewe. None of these brands have faltered in the post-pandemic era. In fact, some of them even reported record earnings. Brunello Cucinelli, for example, not only jumped a solid 27.5% in revenues during the second quarter of 2023, but also upgraded their revenue forecast for the third time last October because of this immense growth. Because these brands are attractive to the billionaire population, who are unfazed by concerns of inflation or costs of living, they continue to ride the money wave while their big brother brands struggle to navigate the oceans. In addition to the minor league brands appealing to the 1%, there are also a few major league anomalies thriving in the post-pandemic landscape. One of these anomalies is...
So once again, I agree with most of the points, but once again, I disagree with the conclusion that he's coming to based on these stats. So he said things like, Zegna and brands like that, they're having growth, while brands that rely on middle-class consumers are the ones that are seeing, declines. That still doesn't prove that the 1% only buy brands like Zegna and stuff, because the 1% buy everything because they can just afford to buy everything. If you're a billionaire $1 billion is so much money that you can buy the LV bag and the Chanel bag and the Gucci bag and the Zegna blazer and the Loro Piana sweater, and it's the equivalent of me buying bread. Because being a billionaire is, you're so rich. So because majority of the consumer base of a lot of these luxury brands like the Gucci's that are seeing really bad financial performance recently, they rely on the middle class. Okay, of course, yes, they're going to suffer more, but that still doesn't mean all of a sudden the 1% don't buy it at all. There seems to be this thing where I think what the quiet luxury trend has created is people genuinely thinking that, okay, let me buy these brands that the 1% buy, or let me dress like the 1%. So I'm only going to buy Jill Sander and The Row and Zegna and Loro Piana, which, once again, quiet luxury in what it means has always been a thing. And there are always people that will always sit on different ends of the spectrum. So there'll always be those super rich people that don't want to wear logos. Then there'll be the super rich people that always like wearing bright colors and crazy jewelry and stuff. It just depends. And it also depends on culture. Like the country I'm from, Nigeria, there are loads of rich people that I grew up around when I was living in Nigeria. Loads. And majority of them wear loads of colors. They don't dress in this quiet luxury way because culturally in Africa, people just wear more colors, especially in West Africa. People dress that way. It's just the way people dress. And it's not tacky. Once again, it's not just because it's not quite luxury doesn't make it tacky. That's just how people dress. So this thing where it's just like, oh, the top 1% in the world only buy Loro Piana and Zegna is just, it's just false, honestly.
This French luxury brand Hermès. Despite undoubtedly being a major league player, the house has achieved insane financial success, raking in $12 billion in annual revenue last year. Their ability to preserve a level of selectiveness gives them sign value that's hard to find in most major league fashion brands. Sign value that's usually only reserved for the niche minor league brands. With all that being said, quiet luxury doesn't appear to be so quiet anymore. TikTok videos, Instagram posts, and general discourse about quiet luxury, old money, stealth wealth, and other variations of its kind have been on the rise for a while now. This surge has prompted people from all demographics to try to emulate the style, whether that's the small minority of the upper middle class that still sporadically indulge in luxury switching to more niche brands, or the broader population opting for fast fashion dupes in an attempt to mirror the 1%. Remember when I mentioned the Brunello Cucinelli and some other minor league brands were achieving record sales? This is undoubtedly because some in the middle class who are willing to take on a risk and splurge may be shifting their preferences towards this new sign value. You just can't help but wonder, is it just a matter of time before we witness a resistance of this style among the uber rich? Could they abandon minimalism for something more dramatic in reaction to the once quiet style no longer maintaining its hushed demeanor? Only time will tell.
Interesting video. I think that I agree with most of the points. There are just some points I didn't agree with, which I mentioned in the video, but it's definitely a good video. I think that the market, which is probably why this video is going viral and why my channel in comparison is really niche, is that it's not marketed to my kind of audience, which are people that have been involved in fashion or understand fashion or are learning about fashion, or someone like me who works in fashion. It's more targeted to a more general audience and trying to explain kind of the landscape of luxury fashion. So I understand where it's coming from in that regard. I just think that this understanding that, you know, super uber wealthy rich people only buy certain low-key brands is just not true. And also, something I will say is that fashion moves in trends, as always. So it wasn't too long ago when in the 90s we were talking about Prada's minimalism and Jill Sander and Helmut Lang spearheading the minimalism movement, and everything was about being minimal. And then we entered the 2000s and everything shifted. And I think now we're in the 2020s where everyone's obsessed with this whole, we're going back to the minimalism, we're going back to this quote unquote quiet luxury. And then 5 years from now, everyone will start wearing logos again and people start wearing color, and then the cycle continues. That's just the cycle of fashion. It's always been that way. So that's another thing to point out. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll be back with another video very soon. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind the scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.